It's not so long ago that the Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake in the world, and it was known for the richest nature reserves. Whereas the Aral Sea region was believed to be prosperous and biologically abundant environment. Before 1960, the sea covered 68,000 square meters with a volume of 1,000 cubic meters of water. For the period of mid-1950 to mid-1980, the Aral Sea waters have been irrigating large areas in the Central Asia via the canal system. The sea drying up was caused by excessive water consumption for irrigation purposes. The population of the areas adjacent to the lake also suffered the adverse impacts of the sea degrading, which caused environmental deterioration, occurrence of conditions detrimental to the human health, degrading of the neighboring region's economy, as well as the social and cultural disintegration. The Aral Sea was classified as the richest fisheries in the world. The annual volume of fish crop in the Aral Sea region water bodies was 35,000 tons. More than 80% of residents living in the Aral Sea coastal zone have been involved into harvesting, processing and transportation of fish and fish products. The Aral Sea underwent the biggest ever reduction in size and salinization. These processes had strong adverse environmental impact on the lake and estuaries of two coastal rivers. Enormous amount of animals and plants died due to reduction of the fresh water quantity and increase of the salt concentration in the lake. The level of water salinity in the Aral Sea increased by more than 1325 times and exceeded the average salt content level in the world ocean by 711 times. Starting from 1961, the sea level was decreasing at acceleration rate of 20 to 80-90 centimeters annually. The photos from the space clearly demonstrate the Aral Sea drying up relief. The Aral Sea acted as a large evaporator, as it is located in the middle of the Central Asian deserts at the height of 53 meters above the sea level. Approximately 60 cubic meters of water was evaporating and releasing into the atmosphere. Due to the dust emissions, the atmosphere haziness increased almost threefold, which affects dispersion of solar radiation and the soil surface temperature. Currently, the shifting sands are conquering ever greater territories, covering the fields, vegetable gardens, roads, and sometimes entire settlements are covered with sand. The new desert Aral is developing within sight of the Aral Sea region population. As a result of the Aral Sea drying, more than 6 million hectares of former water area was released, and this area can be now considered as most rapid growing desert in the world, Aral. The area of the desert lands is not only increasing rapidly, but is also affecting the physical properties of the new localities, where the saline desert areas and salt-containing soils are dominating superproportionally. These areas are the main factors of the ecological system disruption. More than 100 million tons of salt, dust and sand from the dried bottom of the Aral Sea are annually spreading into the air. The main sources of salt spreading are puffed salt marshes and cross salt marshes partially. The local and foreign scientists suggested several options for Aral recovery. They include diversion of Siberian river's flow, water transfer from the Caspian Sea, increase of influent rivers runoff due to glaciers melting, etc. All of them are cost and labor-intensive. Lately, the most realistic option is being suggested: afforestation of the dried bottom with aboriginal plants. Scientists of the Kazakh Scientific and Research Institute of Forestry selected this option as well, considering that tree and shrub vegetation takes 15–20% of the dried area in the territory of the Kazakhstan section of the Aral Sea dried bottom. The process of natural self-organized vegetation is considerably outracing the new firm land development. Prior to proceeding with the researches and creation of the pilot test facilities, the existing data and the current environmental conditions at the denudation sea bottom have been analyzed, as well as experience in forest amelioration works in the arid Aral Sea region related to the sand dune stabilization and protective forest planting in the arid soils. The experience in reforestation of the deserts in Kazakhstan and Middle Asia was analyzed and summarized alongside with studying the forest sites. It is found that the technologies of growing the black Saxaul and Eurasia planting stock for the North Aral Sea region have been elaborated, as well as the establishment of forest plantation and protective plantings from Saxaul. Basing upon this data, the Institute started the experimental trials in 1989. Pursuing this, 26 test sites have been selected in the southern east part of the dried bottom of the Aral Sea in vicinity of Kaska-Kulan Island. As of today, the total area of the test sites exceeds 400 hectares. This area demonstrates the entire spectrum of the soil and hydrologic conditions of the research region. The following plants have been tested: black Saxaul, multirumose tamarisk, Caligonum and other plants. According to the observations, the survival ability of Saxaul seedlings reach up to 66%, and it depends on the soil and hydrologic conditions, weather conditions and planting season. Other tested plants did not acclimate. Thus, it was recommended to use only Saxaul, Sarzasan and tamarisk as forest improvement plantings. At the same time, using the positive results of the scientific researches, the scientists started developing the detailed projects for development of the forest vegetation for the forest amelioration. Kazali Forestry planted the first production crops of Saxaul at a dried sea bottom along the area of 600 hectares. The research results have been used as a theoretical background for development of the implicit approaches to facilitate the natural regeneration of black Saxaul in thin forests and around the standalone trees. Saxaul forests are extremely essential to Kazakhstan in terms of soil protective, erosion preventing, water and climate regulating functions. The wooded lands of Kazakhstan are covered with Saxaul plantings, which equals to 65% of the total area of the main forest-forming species. The plantings of white and black Saxaul occupy 6.3 million hectares, which makes almost the half of all forest area in the Republic. Saxaul is represented by three types: black, white, and Zaisan Saxaul. Saxaul forests in Kazakhstan cover the territory from the North Aral Sea region up to southern borders of the Republic, and from the Caspian Sea up to the Altai Mountains foothills. It covers the deserts of the Aral-Caspian Plateau, Mangostau, Usturt, the sands of the South Balkhash region, large and small Barsuki. Saxaul root system does not grow too deep, but instead it diverges into several roots covered with a great number of small water-absorbing radicals and spreads over large sand bulks. The roots of one Saxaul bush are capable of retaining 4 tons of sand approximately. Black Saxaul is the most dominant type, which occupies around 80% of haloxylon desert woodlands. This is the brushwood of tree up to 8 meters high with a strong trunk, especially in the tree bases area. It has the potential to be used in creating the forest plantations for pastures protection and as the forage plant in single crop and mixed crop sowing. During the previous years of economic slowdown, the significant areas of Saxaul were destroyed due to uncontrolled cutting for heating purposes, which caused desertification of lands and sand dunes shifting. Lately, the great attention is given to creation of the forest crops by planting the seedlings. The state forestry establishments are planting Saxaul at 9,000 hectares area annually, as well as sowing of Saxaul at the area of 20,000 hectares. In order to preserve the Saxaul forest's natural habitats and to avoid cutting, any types of Saxaul forest cutting was prohibited by the order of the Kazakhstan Ministry of Ecology until December 31st, 2023. The amendment stipulating prohibition of Saxaul trading in the retail locations of the Republic was introduced to the Forestry Code in 2017. The experience in forestry maintaining during the periods of the country's economic downfall and recovery, accumulated in the Republic of Korea, is of interest to other countries which are facing the similar problems as well. After the Korean War, the forest condition was critical. In 1970s, Korea proceeded with a forest recovery plan. All citizens of the country took part in implementation of this plan by manually planting fast-growing trees and shrubs. The South Korea achieved great success over the past 40 years in the sphere of forestry management. The Korean forestry specialists have been able to restore 97.4% of deforested mountain slopes, which require planting of 12 billion of trees, as well as allowed for preserving and increasing the biological diversity. The Korean scientists are currently solving the problem of ecological sustainability of the forests in Asia. The Korea Forest Service and the Kazakhstan Ministry of Ecology have started the joint project in the sphere of forestry management. Two countries have signed the memorandum for implementation of this project. The specialists of the forest services of both countries have started the work on planting the Saxaul at the dried bottom of the Aral Sea. Since 2017, the Biodiversity Conservation Foundation, in cooperation with the Forest Service of the Republic of Korea and the Forestry and Wildlife Committee of the Ministry of Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources of the Republic of Kazakhstan, are implementing the project Phytoforest Amelioration of the dried bottom of the Aral Sea and Saxaul region, which implementation was funded by Korea to the amount of $1.7 million. As the part of the project, in March 2018, the Biodiversity Conservation Foundation concluded the contract with Korea University Research and Business Foundation for scientific monitoring of the project. To ensure implementation of this project, the detailed project establishment of planted vegetation at the dried bottom of the Aral Sea at 30,000 hectares area was elaborated. In the course of the detailed project development, the specialists surveyed the boundary areas of the land plots suitable for taking the relevant measures, determined the planting patterns, species composition and types of agricultural practices for creation of the forestry crops. The foundation has purchased the machinery and equipment for Aral and Saxaul State Enterprise for forestry and wildlife protection to perform the work on forestry crops creation. The meeting with the Korean party representatives was held in April 2018 in the territory of Saxaul Forestry, during which the current issues have been discussed as well as the current and future actions plans. The purchased machinery and the project-related territories have been shown. The representatives of the Korean Forest Service held a social campaign for distributing the apple tree seedlings to vulnerable social groups of ITKB settlement. For the period of 2018-2019, the Black Saxaul bedding was arranged at the area of 10,800 hectares in the territory of Aral State Enterprise for the protection of forests and wildlife in Saxaul region. Saxaul seedlings are grown in Saxaul nursery forest to carry out the forest improvement works related to regrowth of the vegetation at the dried bottom of the Aral Sea. The nursery forest area is 32 hectares. The annual product's growing capacity is more than 4 million of Saxaul seedlings. Saxaul seedlings are annually planted at the dried bottom of the Aral Sea at the area of 7,000 hectares. In addition, the scientific and research works are carried out in the nursery forest to resolve the problems associated with growing of the forest crop seedlings. In August 2019, Mr. Song, the professor of the University of Korea, the chief project engineer, together with the employees of the Korean Forest Service, carried out the scientific and research works, during which the samples of soil and Saxaul leaves have been taken to evaluate changes in the soil morphologic properties. Soil samples before Saxaul planting, and later we will analyze the samples to monitor the changes of the soil properties, such as physical, chemical or biological properties after the cultivated planting. It will help us to see how the cultivated planting changes the soil properties. It will serve us as the useful scientific data on cultivated planting in this region. In September 2019, Mr. Sung-gil Lee, the research assistant of the University of Korea, in cooperation with the project managers, performed inventory check of the survival ability of vegetation planted in autumn 2018 and spring 2019. The inventory check data proved that spring-planted seedlings of Saxaul have higher survival ability comparing to those planted in autumn. Aral and Saxaul Forestry established the ameliorative planted vegetation in the light loamy soils with arenaceous apron basing on the recommendations of the Kazakh Research Institute of Forestry. Strip plantations of Saxaul were arranged at the distance of 30-35 meters. This arrangement is confirmed as well by the data on distribution of stable second growth around the mother trees. Ameliorative vegetation has been planted in 2-row strips. Saxaul was planted with 4-5 meter space between rows, whereas the planting stock was bedded with 1.5-2 interval. Spring planted was carried out in early spring right after the snow cover melting. They have been finished within the tightest deadlines and no later than 10 days. Autumn planting was carried out before winter. During 2018-2020, the vegetation will be planted at the dried bottom of the Aral Sea over the area of 13,300 hectares. Altogether, 91,000 hectares of forest products have been planted for the period of 2007 to 2019 at the dried bottom of the Aral Sea. The Republic of Korea spends $2–3 million annually for establishment of green belts and special purpose plantations outside the country. 10 employees of the forestry companies of the Republic of Kazakhstan have completed the training course in the Republic of Korea, dedicated to lessons learned from the forest restoration experience of the Republic of Korea as the part of the project Phyto Forest Amelioration of the dried bottom of the Aral Sea in Kızılırda region. The International Seminar on the Desertification and Restoration of Degraded Lands in Aral Sea, Kızılırda region was arranged on November 21–22 in 2019. The Forestry and Wildlife Committee, Biodiversity Conservation Fund of Kazakhstan, UNO Development Program in Kazakhstan, International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea and Korea Forest Service have been the organizers of the seminar. The seminar was held together with the Korea Forest Service as the part of the project Phytoforest Amelioration of the Dried Bottom of the Aral Sea in Kızılırda region. The experts from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Mongolia, China, Kazakhstan and Korea participated in the seminar. Since 2014, the Republic of Kazakhstan participates in the dialogue on establishment of a FOCO. A FOCO is a regional cooperation mechanism in the forestry sector aimed at settlement of the problem related to deforestation and forest conservation through the lens of sustainable development. A FOCO's goal is to strengthen the regional cooperation in the forestry sector for the purposes of robust forestry management, settlement of the issues related to the climatic changes impact. The Republic of Kazakhstan joined the agreement on establishment of Asian Forest Cooperation Organization following the Decree No. 539 of the Government of the Republic of Kazakhstan dated July 26, 2019. The ministry submitted a suggestion to focus on allocation of subsidies for implementation of 6 projects in the territory of the Republic of Kazakhstan. As of today, the governments of Korea and Kazakhstan are implementing the project on planting Saksaul in the territory of 10,000 hectares at the dried bottom of the Aral Sea. In 70s, Korea started tree planting of the degraded territory. The Korean lands were devastated after the Korean War and the soil condition was really bad. That is why we hope that having such experience we would be able to work in severe soil conditions of Kazakhstan. Moreover, in the realm of further cooperation in the forestry sector, Korea has established ASEAN, the organization with 9 countries, including such countries as Bhutan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, which joined it recently. The state of Korea intends to exchange and share experience in forest restoration with the Southeast and Central Asia countries. Furthermore, Kazakhstan shows interest in establishment of a focal training center similar to one located in Myanmar. We can discuss these issues intrinsically and develop the plans for cooperation in the future. Saxaul is a desert flower which is capable of surviving the fervent heat of the desert and salt marsh depletion. It protects the sandy soil from the winds, preventing wind erosion, and allows for preserving the natural ecosystem of the desert.